I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. Today, every Friday, we call it the Healing Circle. And what a special time it is. It's a time to share, to learn, to be introspective, to examine our feelings, our mental health, our physical health, our community health, the health of the planet, the health of the nation. We look at health in as many ways as we can and share our perspectives, our fears, and our solutions, our peace. Well, I do this in conjunction with my partnership with the co-host for today for the Healing Circle, and that's Dr. Bravada Garrett-Akinsanya. Dr. Akinsanya is the principal at Braken's Psychological Consulting and the leader at the African American Child Wellness Institute. As a matter of disclosure, I served as a member of the board of the Institute, and it's a pleasure to be working with her. Further disclosure, and this is an important one for me, I happen to be a customer of Braken's, and Fridays early in the morning, I have my 1 hour session with my therapist. And I've been in therapy for about 3 years. And the reason for therapy for me is I want to discover how I can be the best me I can be. What can I do differently? What can I learn about myself? How I interact with the people I love, people that love me, and how do I navigate as a elder and as an African American man in an environment that is often hostile or resistant, or is the hostility a figment of my imagination? So you need help. I need help, and I get that help by talking to my therapist who's a part of the team at Braken's. And I say this because I want other Black men in particular, but Black people in general, to understand that it's okay. We've got to look at this question of mental health and not be stymied by stigmatism or by stigma associated with am I healthy, am I crazy, or what's wrong with me, or immobilized by those kinds of fears. So you have to understand there's a way through this, a way around it. So I say all this to encourage other Black people and other Black men in particular to look at health and look at wellness and be proactive and find and engage those resources in the community like Braken's and others who can help you navigate toward your best self. Well, with that, Dr. B, let me bring you in. Good to see you, my friend. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, and excited to be in here and join you today as we talk about the healing circle and the healing of our communities. You've been on this battlefield for a long time, and I'm really grateful for the voice you give us as a Black community, and not just that, a multicultural, diaspora-based Black community around the world, and not just that, all of our other brothers and sisters who are BIPOC members get voice here with you on the work you do, the podcast, the newspaper, the global citizen you are, and that you introduce us to becoming here in this community in Minneapolis. So thank you for including me as part of the wonderful work you do. And today, as we talk about stepping into the healing circle, I would just like to tell people the protocol, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
So every week, for our listeners, if you're new or old, every week we come on Fridays and we set aside time to talk about our own healing. This is a safe environment where sometimes we laugh, sometimes we cry, sometimes we get angry, but we are our true selves in this space. So the protocol for meeting is that we envision ourselves in a circle. Even though this circle may be virtual, we're all next to each other. We're all holding hands and sitting in circle and have access to power, which is our voice. We have all equal access to the center of the circle. So the hierarchical nature of many cultures is not replicated with us as an African people. The only hierarchy we have is one of respect. And that means we honor our elders because they're the shoulders we are standing on. We honor our elders because they are closest to our ancestors. And those ancestors created the foundation of our lives. And we honor our ancestors because they're closest to our Creator. So, in this honoring sacred space, whether it be virtual or in person, we acknowledge our commonalities with all humankind, and we acknowledge our commonality with each other. So, in this circle, the African belief of consubstantiation, that means all living things are connected. We're connected to each other and the earth and the sky and everything in it. And we honor that. And by holding respect in this circle, we acknowledge that our strength is greatest when we are together. Also, in the circle, we use an orderly process. So, if we were in a real physical circle, we would definitely have a talking stick. So, in this circle, we have and use a virtual talking stick, and it goes from one speaker to the next. You can ask for the stick, you can pass the stick as the spirit moves, and in that space, everyone has voice. So, we say Ashe today to our Creator, Ashe to our elders, Ashe to our ancestors, and Ashe to our listeners and those who are viewing us right now. Thank you so much for joining us. And I give the talking stick back to our village Baba, Brother Al McFarlane. Here's the talking stick.
Thank you, Sister B. You know, Dr. B, I so love the teaching that you do in talking about protocol. I think that even the language, the word, the thinking about how we order ourselves with each other is important. And it's important to tell, you know, I recall being in Ghana, doing some work to promote an international arts festival. And when we would go into a room of elders or chiefs or kings or queen mothers, the convener of the meeting opened the meeting by doing what you just did, and that's speaking to the ancestors and asking the Creator to be present in the words, the thoughts, the ideas, the energy, the attitudes of all in the room, and to ensure that the truest truth emerged on every syllable and in every motive. And so that's a wonderful thing. I think that one of the things we need to do is try to figure out ways to broaden our appreciation of how we should order and can order when we come together, and create a system that allows us to start meetings like that all the time, because it also centers us, gets you settled, gets you, you know, kind of in a place where you can focus on what you're going to be talking about and what's around you and your feelings. And so I think it's a wonderful thing. So thank you again, Dr. B, for doing this and leading this every week. Excuse me. I also wanted to say that this is a particularly interesting time with the challenges continuing in Ukraine, and now the challenges in Israel and Palestine, and probably numerous other conflicts around the world. And I wonder, and I'm saying this in hopes that somebody listening or viewing may want to jump in the conversation and be a part of it. And if you do, I think just send an email or send a note to the comment saying you want to have your voice in this conversation. We want you in it. So, you know, we'd be glad to bring you onto the conversation. But I'm concerned that there's a feeling of pressure. Mm-hmm. There's the pressure of this massive and costly and, you know, we're becoming almost, what's the word, anesthetized to Ukraine. We've normalized that killing, and that's unfortunate. It's disastrous. And now we've got the imminent danger coming out of the Hamas attack on Israel on October 7th. And so we're kind of holding our breath to see what's going to happen there. And we also have pushed to the side a little bit the drama of former President Donald Trump in his trial, I think in New York right now, what that means. So a lot is going on. And how do we navigate that? How do we keep ourselves from being overwhelmed? And how do we figure out a way that we can sort of see that despite all this turmoil in the world, it's on TV and we see and hear stuff, we still have a way to keeping our blood pressure down, and our sense of humor and our commitment to being ourselves. What do you think? Do you see what I'm describing as real, the sense of pressure in the community?
Yes, I do. And actually, I've thought about it for a while now, even as we entered Ukraine, and because our community, we're already dealing with uh, killing of Black men and boys and girls. But even larger than that, the unprecedented number of um, mass murders in our country has been weighing me down emotionally, even physically, because I feel connected. That sense of consubstantiation is so real for me and many of us. So when we see somebody on TV, and let's say it's a person who done something terrible, we're holding our breath praying it won't be a Black person from our community, or something terrible that's happened to them. We're holding our breath hoping it won't be somebody from our community. And for those of us who see the world as our community, those injuries continue to be duplicated, because all the brothers and sisters on this planet are our brothers and sisters, no matter where they come from or how they look, because we just come in different containers. We're all spirit, and we're all made mostly of water, and our bodies are our containers, and we just look differently. But that doesn't mean we don't have that human experience of loss and grief and fear that can encapsulate us. And psychologists, we look at this, and the impact of it is secondary trauma or vicarious trauma. So by watching others suffer, watching others harmed, watching others blamed unfairly, those things, we kind of gravitate to them as a Black people. And because we do that, we're in a place of healing constantly, even though it may not be our immediate family. We're spiritual in nature. Many of us say thank God that it's not us, but at the same time it is us. So that simplicity, that experience of connectedness and collectivism brings to us a painful experience when we see war, when we see people turning on each other. I'm really, really troubled by what's happening in Israel and the Hamas, and more importantly, the Palestinian people who are just trying to live and who've been subjected to racism and prejudice, just like apartheid between them and Israelites. And that predated the Hamas attack. So now they're also being victimized just by being where they are in their homes, and they're not being cared for. And the idea of the Israelis coming and doing hand-to-hand combat, all the things like that are going on, they're very difficult. So people, I think, feel just as you and I do, that this is worrisome, and it leaves a sense of unease in all of us. If you're connected to what's going on, you got to literally be hiding under a rock with your eyes closed, not to see what's going on and not to see so much anger and hurt in the world. So I'm feeling what you're feeling. I think many of our people who are paying attention to our program right now are hearing and feeling what we're describing. It's a very natural human experience when we see something like this going on around the world. And we cannot forget what the Russian country was doing, that's just being replicated right now by Hamas. You know, we can't neglect that.
What do we do with children? How do we explain the world to our children and grandchildren. I think this question of trauma and the impact of trauma on our bodies, our minds, our worldview, and children are connecting to knowledge about the world via TV and internet, et cetera, and discussing things that are important at school. Ensure that children, well, let me think back now. So I remember being in the 6th grade in 1959 in Kansas City, Missouri. That dates me a little bit, right? But I remember from 55 to about 59, we had drills. Get under your desk because there was the threat of nuclear war, the Russian menace, right? And so from maybe 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, 6th grade, 1959, we had drills about the threat of an attack, a nuclear attack by the Soviet Union, and that what we should do is get under our desk and as a response to it, or move to a place in the halls. But I'm thinking back, how did that fear impact our lives? What has that done to us growing up? How do we see each other, see the world, and see the likelihood of our own personal annihilation? So that's one thought. I'm thinking about, being a kid and being introduced to this idea of annihilation. Let me add to that another thought. My parents owned a grocery store in Kansas City, and along with the local newspaper, it was the Kansas City Call, the Black newspaper. We got every week a copy or a number of Jet magazines, right? And Jet was a national Black mini tabloid publication that had, census data, church news, politics, business, and just a lot of information in it. And I remember the year that they brought the Jet magazine in that had Emmett Till in a coffin, a close-up of his face on the cover of Jet magazine. And that copy of Jet magazine showed this body swollen, disfigured, an unspeakable horror, and the story about how he was lynched and tortured and thrown into a river because of some allegations that he had stepped out of his place. And the lesson out of that incident to all of Black America was that if you step out of your place, this will happen to you. You will be killed, and you'll be lynched, and you'll be thrown in the river, and nobody's going to care. We're going to laugh about it because lynching was a public activity back in those days, particularly before that, but even continued. So I'm trying to think about that as a grade school student. What does seeing that, how does that impact my mind and my sense of the future? And I want to fast forward to today and compare how I am able to negotiate, navigate when the threats seem to be compounded now and more imminent. But I don't know. What do you think? I'm just musing, Dr. B. So how does a person, again, maintain a balance and some confidence in the ability to move? And you're muted. I'm going to pass the talking stick back to you.
Thank you. I really, I'm glad you asked that question, and I love your musing as you begin to connect the dots for all of us in terms of our real lived experiences and how they impact us now, whether it's in early childhood, early adulthood, whenever it took place, those cumulative effect of those exposures to frightening things, to fear, to demise, imminent demise. Those things, they kind of set up in our spirits. They take hold of it, and they stay there, and they can be triggered by certain circumstances. So it's important, I think, when we think about ourselves and how to manage it, there are some positive affirmations that we often can use if we've got them. And often it can be as simple as, I've lived through this before, I'll make it through it again. Sometimes we can say, I'm stronger than people think. I'm stronger than I even think, because with my faith, I know it won't last forever, and I've made it through the hard times. But the other thing I think we have to say, reality is to say, ouch. Because there's something powerful about acknowledging your pain. Sometimes you have to really just say the word, ouch. Ouch. And when we do it, that gives the world and the universe and us permission to say, this hurts. I don't like it. Ouch. So part of the work with kids that I see is to let them know when they're safe, let them know the adults around them are safe, and for them to be able to learn to say, ouch. And so I that's what I think about as a clinician, and especially as a child therapist, is I want to find ways for kids to say, ouch. Sometimes they can say it out loud. That's good. Sometimes they can draw it. That's good. And most importantly, in their play, you can see that it's not just about playing. I've seen kids experience vicarious traumatic events. And one particular one, I'll never forget this. The little girl was talking about somebody getting stabbed in her North Minneapolis neighborhood. And they were next door, and everybody was having a party at her grandma's house, and somebody down the street or next door got stabbed, and the police were coming. And so in her little drawings, she had not drawn in her little place, she had a little police car rushing up in front of the house. She had talked about the police car, and she said, and somebody got stabbed. And when she drew the stab person, because she made like a foundation, like the ground for him, and she was just doing red stabs. She was working out that pain. And then the reason I don't forget it, and she said, and the police were coming from people's house to people's house. And when they came to our house, my grandma didn't want to talk to them because she had been drinking gin. She said my grandma didn't want because she had some gin. So it was such a innocent depiction of what she had seen from her own perspective. But we teach children that it's okay to say ouch. And somewhere between then and adulthood, somebody tells us we can't. So if you have to hold that ouch in, it's hard to heal. I stick. Look like you need it.
I do. I'm thinking about the question of therapy, because I opened up talking about my being in therapy and being a customer of your company. And I raised the question about therapy for our children and therapy as one of the ways to respond to trauma. And I believe that, and I've seen that the society moves with an amount of swift compassion when tragic events occur in white communities. It's a fire, it's a terrific, horrible accident, or an incident at a school, and all of the general community, us included, respond by saying we need to make sure we protect these children and give them, the tools to keep, and move towards normalcy and not be, again, stymied or stifled or traumatized further by having witnessed and experienced some event. And, and I've always said that, but too often things happen like that every day, all up and down the street, just like that child was talking about. But there's no system, no process that declares that all of our children need to be addressed and saved and responded to and supported. So how do we is that a fair assessment, number one, that our pain, our trauma is not regarded as real at the societal and institutional level? And even if it's not, what is our obligation to know that it's real, and to bring our own solutions to ourselves in a way that we even have to challenge, the power downtown to demand the resources and the attention that our pain, our ouch, deserves. I'll pass the talking stick back to you.
Well, I'm glad to receive it. That question you just asked is it's about social justice agenda that we have as a Black people. And when we talk about Black lives matter, Black pain matters, and the skill set of recognizing that we deserve the right to be well, just like any other creation on this planet, and recognizing that we have to learn how to get our wellness and how to access those services for ourselves, and demand that they be recognized and attended to in our social cultural environment. So one of the things I think about when I hear you say that is that our ouch needs to be acknowledged through legislative practices. It needs to be, services need to be funded by people who understand that ouch. Because for too long, we've had majority culture trying to heal us and mold us to be like them. And that was the only measure of wellness, is that your pain had to look like white pain. Your articulation of your pain had to be like theirs before they realize it. They'd have to be able to see your humanity in a different way to treat you. So one of the things that I think is important when you talk about that is that systems continue to perpetuate. They may not physically lynch us, but we're lynched systemically by medical areas, by educational areas, by criminal justice areas. And the lynching they're giving is lynching of our spirits and our bodies, and using our bodies to make profit from our pain, as you often refer to. Mm-hmm. So when I think about what we need is to be able to tap into our ancestral ways of healing. I have seen children, adults, elders drumming with tears falling down their cheeks. And that drumming, they say, is the heartbeat of our culture. And the reason we respond so deeply to drumming is because it reminds us of our innate rhythm of keep going, that says keep going by our Creator. So our Creator says, as our heart beats, our internal drum beats. As that drum beats, it's the request and command of our Creator to tell us to keep going. I have a reason for you to be. I have a reason for you. Now, how do we teach that with children? Mm-hmm. We sit in a little circle and we feel our hearts. And we think about, what is our heart saying? Is it saying boom, 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 bang, bang, bang? What is our heart saying? And children are quiet and they stop. And when they're safe, it's a steady beat. When they're afraid, the beat gets quicker. And we get them to listen to their own heartbeat so that they know what to do when they're afraid or angry, to breathe and reassign new breath to that drum beat internally. We do it as adults when we stop and we do imagery and we see ourselves in a beautiful space, maybe that only we could go, or a place we've always wanted to be. When we go there in our spirit and we stop and we hear our breath and we hear our heartbeat, and that's when the Creator gives us direction to keep going. So healing exists within every one of us. Mm-hmm. And when we choose healing and killing can't coexist. Ugh. Healing requires living. It requires living in yourself and in others. And what I see when I see war are people who want and need to heal.
Mhm.
And they think more killing will lead to their healing, but it will not. It cannot. That's what
That's
I
powerful,
believe.
Dr. B. That's powerful. So killing and healing don't exist in the same place,
It can't.
not in the same breath. Yeah. And then how do we, again, attune ourselves and our hearts and our minds to the power of healing and allow it, encourage it, nurture it so that it dispels the impulse for negative action, for killing, and iterations of that are destructive, that are divisive, that are hurtful to ourselves, to our families, and to humanity, and to all of living things. Well, I think it's wonderful to have this conversation. And I think this is what our dinner conversation ought to be in all of our families. I recall now too, Dr. B, that's why I love talking like this, sitting at a aunt's house in Kansas City. I might have been like 20 years old, 21. And for some reason, this was a special weekend in my life. It might have been 21, 22 even. And I was sitting at this dining room. They were sitting on chairs and on the floor under the divan, like 4 or 5 aunts, my mother and 4 of her sisters, and maybe my sister and a cousin. I was the only guy in the room, young man in the room. And so all of a sudden, these are aunties that I grew up with. Hey, Auntie Tiola, Auntie R.T. Augusta, Auntie Ernestine. These are aunt and I'm nephew Al, or my mom's son. And then all of a sudden, one person started talking about what the world was, like maybe trouble in the world. But we have something in our family that's carried us through generations, and that's why we're here today. And I believe that And so I don't remember exactly what she said, but I remember the spirit of what was being said. And then the next person said, well, I remember A, B, C, D, E, and here's what happened to our people. Here's how we survived it, and here's how we've come. And for that, I'm grateful today. And I believe that I don't remember the words, right? But the spirit was speaking in them. And then the next person said, so it's maybe 8 people in the room altogether. And after about the 5th person, I said, oh, I see what's going on now. Each person is making a declaration or a testimony or saying something. And once that person says it, we're sitting in a circle, the next person speaks, and the next person then speaks, and the next person speaks. I said, no, this is going to get to me in a minute. And I've never been in this situation before, but they're going to expect me to say something because I see what's going on here. And so it went around and got around to me. And I kind of looked tied-tongued, couldn't talk, looking perplexed, like I wasn't sure what was happening. And one of my aunts said, boy, what you got to say? And so I said, oh, you expect me to say something? And they said, yeah, it's your time. You got to say it. And so I can't remember exactly what I said, Dr. B, but she said to me, who are you? And why are you here? Who are you and why are you here? And you have to answer that question right now. Right now. And she said, she turned to a verse in the Bible in Exodus. And the verse said something about Moses speaking to God and God responding, why are you calling my name? Go talk to the people so they can move forward. That is your work. That's who you are. That's what you got to do. So I remember that, but that's the spirit. So let me just share that. I see our brother, Dr. Oliver, is joining us too in a minute. react to that, respond to that, and maybe Dr. B, respond to the idea of how a person becomes aware and how that settling in a person, on a person of a spirit, the spirit, can guide that person. Because I think that was one of the defining moments in my conscious, life and awareness. But there have been many more like that, but that was one, and it was appropriate to tell it right now. What do you think, Dr. B?
I think that's a lovely story. And I think it shows how power is shared in our culture,
Mhm.
regardless of your age, that you have value. And I think that the reason that you could claim that power is because that space was made for you.
Mhm.
And whether you expected it to happen when you sat there in the first place, you could see the way it was going, and creating that space, just that space for voice, is what allows spirit to come. Sometimes that space is just being silent long enough so somebody can think it through. Sometimes that space is setting up models of sharing. But the most important part that I heard you say was, who are you and what are you here for? What are you doing here? And giving you a right to claim that, and knowing that it can evolve over time. But in that moment, you are here. That's the main point. You're here and you're somewhere. And knowing that you have a place there. That's what I love about our culture. Everybody has a space. So I think at that point, I would just, I have nothing else to say about it. You already showed it.
I think my answer then was that I'm my father's son, and I'm here to do what he sent me to do.
Wow.
That's my work. Let
Wow.
me bring Dr. Oliver in just a second. Before we do that, here's a message from one of our sponsors.
Thank you.
Are you or someone you know recovering financially from the COVID-19 pandemic, the lockdown, or any other reason? If so, help is available. Findhelp.org is a site to find a wide range of resources, including food, medical care, and more. The best part is based on your zip code. Visit findhelp.org, enter your zip code and the service you need. You'll get a map directing you to the organizations that can help you. Help is waiting at findhelp.org. If you need help starting anew, findhelp.org is the site for you. All right, we're back, and I want to broaden the conversation by bringing in two other great voices today. Let me start with Dr. Oliver Williams. I know, Dr. Williams, you caught a little of the conversation between me and Dr. B, but let me pass the talking stick to you and say what's on your mind.
Well, it sounded like the conversation was around how do you find your place in the community?
Mm-hmm.
How do you contribute? And hearing the story, it sounded like it was a way to be able to find your place within the community. And as you were talking about that, and you were talking about your father, one of the things that my father used to say to me when I was growing up, my father died when I was 16. And so, but he would say, don't be an educated fool. And one of the things that I appreciate is and sort of, it sort of resonated with me as I interacted with people throughout my life. And it's kind of like, you have to be accessible to people, and you can't feel as though and behave as though you're better than anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And that what you need to do is you need to find a way to be able to engage with and talk to and uh, uh, be responsive to people in a way that is useful but not problematic. And I always appreciated that, and I think it's helped me, as I engage with people, and the fact that and also when you interact with people who have different types of status within society, if you can be you when you interact with them, then you don't feel less than them. But equally, when you interact with people whose status is different than yours, then they don't feel beneath you, you know. And so that's been helpful for me, over the years, and regarding thinking about those things. If that makes any sense to you all. So I'll
Well,
pass the talking stick back to you.
thank you, Dr. Williams. Let's bring one more of our colleagues in, and that's Sister Anita Stewart from the African American Child Wellness Institute. Sister, how are you? Good to see you. I'm passing the talking stick to you.
Thank you, and it's very nice to see you also. Maybe you could refresh me on what the question is. I came in late trying to adjust my computer to the
Sure.
system.
Sure. Well, let me do that. We were just sort of freestyling over a variety of issues, and I was reminiscing on growing up and the trauma that I experienced. One, I started saying how when I was in sixth grade in 1959, I remember that from 55 to 59, we had drills at my grade school in Kansas City, drills about how to get under your desk if there was a bomb. And that was back when it was the Russian menace and the threat of nuclear war, Russia, United States, and we were training to respond to that. And I also mentioned other personal trauma that I experienced or saw, like getting a copy of Jet magazine with Emmett Till on the cover, dead, disfigured. What kind of trauma does that have? And I raised those questions to bring us fast forward in today, because we've got a lot of stuff going on in the world. How do we talk to each other and to our children about Ukraine, about Israel and Palestine, about former President Donald Trump under indictment and facing 93 charges in 4 different trials? All of this is massive pressure. And with that, and that's on television, on social media, and with that, how do we figure out how we protect ourselves, our own sanity, but our responsibility to children as well? So that was kind of the question. With the notion of war being imminent right now in the news and other things that reflect dysfunction in the government and betrayal of the country by a former president, how do we keep balance and sanity in ourselves and our children and our families? So that's kind of the background.
I guess I've always been very open with my children about everything, including sex. I mean, including war, including trauma and what that means to them. It was like ordinary conversation with people of color that we needed to educate our children about what's going on around us. And so that was very important subject. As of right now, I think that it's really, really important for us to be very upfront and talk to our children and let them know exactly what's going on, the truth. Whether we want to hide it, we can't hide it. We can't tell them something that's not there and that's not true. And so we really need to talk to our children so that they have a good understanding about why things are the way they are. And I've invested a lot of time in doing that from the time that they were able to understand, from the time that they were little babies, when they had some sort of problem, to tell them what that problem meant and what it was about. and how they might be able to resolve it. It seems a little grown up. It seems like it's something that, some people have a hard time dealing with, because when children are children, you don't think that children understand quite everything. But they understand. I'm quite sure that the children in Palestine are really going through it, because they know that they're having problems. They know that their parents are gone. They know that people around them are being killed and murdered. And so it just doesn't make any good sense to not tell them what's going on, because they need to know, and try and do it in a way that they understand.
Let me grab the talking stick from you, just to reiterate what you're saying, Sister Anita. I remember when I was growing up, three of my brothers were in Vietnam. One was in the Navy, one was in the Army, another one was two. One was in the Navy and one was in the Air Force. And later, my younger brother joined the Army. And I remember seeing on the news, sitting under my mom and dad, seeing under the news, they were saying that the American soldiers were engaged with guerrilla combat. And I thought they were saying gorilla, like ooh, 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 gorilla monkey. And I was so afraid for my brothers that those big gorillas were coming to beat up my brothers. When I went to the zoo, I was so afraid of the gorillas. Until one day somebody explained that's not gorilla, it's the word gorilla, and they explained the difference. But I don't even know how many years went by before I realized that in my little head, my only equivalent of the gorilla combat was gorillas. So sometimes we as adults also have to give vocabulary, like Sister Anita was saying, we got to give age appropriate vocabulary to kids. And as I think about these wars and how much it's hurt me as an adult, my advice for parents and even as grown-ups, don't spend all your time looking at the TV, because it's going to be on every station all day, all night. And so maybe that's the time you want to play Scrabble with your kids, or Monopoly, or maybe change to Family Feud or something, so you don't have to think about that pain. You can only take so much in so many doses until it really seeps in and you start experiencing that vicarious trauma and you start having trauma impacts and symptoms. So we really cannot overdose ourselves by looking at all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, I get a talking stick back to Brother Al. But
Well, Dr. Oliver, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, I was thinking a similar thing, is that I remember trying to have conversations with my son about things. And if it became too much for him, then it's kind of like saying, no, I don't want to hear this. I'm not ready to hear this. So the age appropriate conversation is something that I think is important. I do think that we need to share things, and I do think that one of the things I appreciated about my dad was oftentimes he would share things with me, and sort of treat me like I was a human being that should know things. But I think what we have to do is use our judgment about what's useful and what's appropriate to be able to share with kids, because sometimes they may not be ready to hear certain things, and they may give you cues about what they're ready to hear and what they're not ready to hear. But I do agree that what we need to do is to be able to talk with them, share with them, and engage them in conversations, about things. So I remember sometimes my dad would share things with me, and I'm talking, and I listened to him and say, "What is he talking about?" And as I got older, I realized what he was trying to tell me, but it was like, what, and so that's the thing I think about now. I think about with my son Sam when he was a little guy, and I would try to share things with him, because I love what my dad did with me, but there was only so much I could understand at that age. Then as I got older, I said, so that's what he's talking about. So that balance
Mhm.
is what I think about.
My grandson, he's always been very outspoken and would tell me when he was able to listen to something or not. And when he would say, I don't want to hear that, Grandma, I can't talk about that right now. And I knew that he couldn't talk about it because maybe it was because he was sensitive to the information that he was receiving. And so I would stop talking, automatically stop talking, but then I wouldn't forget. And when he was able to mature enough, I was able to start to slowly give him that information. And he would say, "Yeah, I understand now. I do understand." But that was kind of scary for him. For kids, they don't understand a lot of this stuff. And it is scary.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, Sister Anita, when do you think you understood? Because I think about this all the time. I remember being, 5 years old. I remember being 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And I remember conversations and what I would look back on as awarenesses at that time. But when do you think uh, what stages of awareness did you experience growing up that you let guide you and how you deal with your grandkids or your kids?
Well, like Dr. B said, you know, the age is very important. And when I was maybe a small child, maybe 5 or 6, old enough to understand some things, but not everything.
Mm-hmm.
My parents would protect me. My grandmother would protect me. She'd take me out to the farm and say, "Come on, let's go and chase the chickens or do something like that," or do something like you were talking about, Dr. B, play a game or do something different. Because there was times when I couldn't understand. But then when Martin Luther King died, I understood that because I was old enough. I was probably 9 or 10 then, and I could understand that he was killed. And I found myself crying because I knew he was a really good man. My family and some of my friends, they would listen to his speeches. And one of my friends, she was able to march with him. And so I understood what that meant. There was times when I was older, um, I would say in my teens, we went to a dance, and some of this stuff was infiltrated into my system where I knew what to do. There was a woman who was running from the police. She was trying to get away because that's when they were attacking Black people during the civil rights movement. And she came, and I heard her knocking on my window, and the police were trying to chase these people. And so the driver turned the light off, and we opened the door, and she crawled up under our legs. She crawled up under our legs, and we gently closed the door so that he didn't know that we had the door open. That same policeman came to the car and asked us if we had seen this person. And everybody in the car said, "No, we didn't see the person."
What city was that, Anita?
Huh?
What city was that?
That was here.
In Minnesota?
That
And
was here in Minnesota. It was over on 4th Avenue and Lake Street.
yeah.
And so we were able to get her back over North Minneapolis so that she would be in a safe place. And that was really, really something that I did remember. And I would say I was probably maybe 13 or 14 then. And we were at a teen get together or something like that. And so it was of no consequence to even just say, "Well, we got to protect this person," because that's what we were taught.
Mm-hmm.
People of color have always been taught to do that, or should have been taught to do that. Because if we're not our own protectors, who will we be?
Let me bring Sister Sherilyn LaChapelle in. Sherilyn, thank you for jumping in. And we're just generally talking about trauma and what is our obligation to discuss difficult things with our children. When are they ready? How do we transmit information, knowledge that sustains them, protects them, and particularly today when you have the war in Ukraine continuing, you have the war now between Israel and Hamas, and you have a former president in 4 trials for having betrayed the country, at least allegedly so. And you have things happening all over. How do you keep ourselves and keep our children grounded and safe? What do you think, Shirley? I'm gonna pass the talking stick to you. Yeah, unmute. There you go.
Okay, I'm gonna mute now. Might have to mute your computer. Okay, much like Oliver, my father died when I was 15, and he died, I think, Good Friday of '68, right? At the same time, MLK was murdered. And I will have to say that I was 15. I will have to say that I had to grow up immediately. My father died. There were 7 other children behind me. My mother had been a stay-at-home housewife. We were living in the projects, so I didn't have a nice, relaxed country environment. There were gangs, there were all that. But I had to move up and help my mother plan the funeral. Just everything. My mother, I'd hear her crying downstairs, and I was a daddy's girl born on his birthday. But I realized that I had to support my mother. No matter how I was feeling, I had to support my mother. And that's when I started suffering with depression. All I can tell you is I have found it better to tell children what's really going on. When I was in trauma services at Hennepin County Medical Center, and I was on trauma call for gunshot wounds, car accidents, when they called me on the weekend and said, we've got 2 gunshot wounds coming in, I'd wake my children up, put them in the car, and bring them to the hospital with me. And they would sit out in the hall as we bring the patient through to go get ready for the OR. I wanted them to see that people really died when they're shot.
Wow.
That don't wake up and go home, and what it does to other family members. Needless to say, my children are doing fine. Nobody owns a gun. Nobody has done a violent act to anyone, and they do know that guns kill. And yes, it might have been somewhat traumatic, but I would rather have them understand that this is not a kind world, and that we must treat others with compassion and move away from those violent individuals. And anybody who tries to make you feel like harming somebody is no big deal, it is. And I wanted them to see that.
Dr. B, Dr. Oliver.
My last comment is about the war. I've stopped looking at the news. I can't take it anymore. Mm-hmm. I'm traumatized from that. I'm triggered because I'm afraid World War III is about to happen. I'm so frightened of that. And the next thing I'm frightened of is that we will start to have terrorist attacks in this country. And because of what the president said, throwing his weight totally, we're with you all the way. I feel the appropriate thing, if President Obama had been there, would be to sit both parties down, and we have to have a ceasefire now. We're not giving any money to kill any people. Let's figure this out. This has got to stop now. But when you go and say, we'll give you $10 billion and we're behind you, that's like telling your child who's beating up on people in the street, I'm with you all the way. And you know he's wrong. The other kid may be wrong too, but what you did was escalated the situation. You did not bring it to a peaceful resolution. So with that said, I will pass the talking stick back to you, Al. Thank you.
I think that's it. We're out of time. What a wonderful program, an important issue. But I think we are moving in a space where we have to have
Al, you're on mute.
Okay.
No, it's not. I can hear him.
Okay. But we're out of time. Thank you all for being here.
Al, you're still on mute.
I am not sure why, because
I hear him. I hear you, Brother
on my side. You know what, though? Let's say goodbye to everybody. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Hey, bye. Thank you.
Nice seeing you.
And that's got me triggered because I think most people, because I'm 70.